What does it take for a 7-time world champion to transform Ferrari into a championship team again? Lewis Hamilton arrived at Ferrari like a thunderbolt in the Formula One paddock, unleashing a mix of expectations, hopes, and doubts that shook the entire motorsport community. It wasn't simply a change of team, it was the union of two legends, the most successful driver of the modern era with the most iconic and passionate team in the history of the sport. The move had a seismic effect, altering not only the grid but the entire narrative of the championship. Carlos Sainz, displaced to make room for him, surprised the entire world with his statements of support for the new Ferrari Hamilton project. Instead of resentment or bitterness, Sainz offered a cool and mature analysis, emphasizing that Ferrari's chances of fighting for the title had only increased. His words, laced with honesty and pragmatism, resonated even more strongly because they came from someone who had been directly affected by Hamilton's arrival. Despite this support, the reality on the road has been much harsher. From the first race, Hamilton has faced an invisible but relentless barrier, adapting to the SF25. A car that, while competitive at times, is unpredictable, demanding, and radically different from anything the Briton had experienced in his previous years. Every corner, every braking, every acceleration has been a lesson in humility. Hamilton described the car as completely foreign, language that reveals the depth of the disconnect between his driving instincts and the responses the SF25 offered him. The initial results reflect the magnitude of the challenge. A modest 10th place in Australia, earning just 1 point, a painful disqualification in China, a 7th place in Japan that tasted like defeat, and a 5th place in Bahrain that, although more respectable, fell far short of the expectations placed on it. Each race has become an internal battlefield for Hamilton, fighting not only against his rivals but also against the clock of his own adaptation, in a category where patience is a luxury few can afford. The pressure doesn't come solely from the external environment. Within Ferrari, Hamilton's arrival meant more than just adding a proven talent. It was a declaration of intent, a desperate bid to return to the top after years of accumulated frustration. The expectation of an immediate, almost miraculous impact has placed a weight on Hamilton's shoulders that not even his 7 world titles can fully alleviate. And in the midst of this storm, the first whispers of doubt have begun to emerge. What if this gamble doesn't pay off? What if, instead of being the savior, Hamilton ends up being just another name on Ferrari's long list of unfulfilled promises? The first speculations about a possible premature retirement for the Briton have begun to circulate in the paddock. Voices like Ralf Schumacher's are already warning that, if the situation doesn't improve quickly, Hamilton could decide his time in Formula One is over. Not because he's lost his talent or his desire, but because he could no longer find the satisfaction and challenge that always drove him forward. The possibility of seeing Hamilton step down from the car without having won his coveted title with Ferrari adds a layer of human drama to this story. Ferrari, despite initial obstacles, has shown glimpses of competitiveness that suggest the season is still salvageable. From the first free practice sessions of the season at Albert Park, the Maranello team made it clear that, under ideal conditions, the SF25 has the pace to compete at the top. Charles Leclerc led several of the race simulations, showing that when all the factors align, setup, temperature, driver adaptation, Ferrari can be a real threat to McLaren and Red Bull. However, the positive feelings from practice have not consistently translated into race results. The difficulty lies in the inherent instability of the SF25. On a technical level, the car is highly sensitive to changes in tire temperature and track conditions. This phenomenon, known as graining in the tires, has severely affected the car's balance during Grands Prix, forcing drivers to constantly modify their driving style to maintain the optimal performance window. The direct consequence of this situation is erratic performance. Ferrari can be brilliant on a short run, but abruptly lose competitiveness on long runs or when conditions change. Beyond the car's mechanical characteristics, strategic errors have been a constant concern. Poor pit stop management, incorrect tire selection in changing conditions, and unclear team orders have been recurring factors that have not only harmed results but also internal morale. The incident at the Chinese Grand Prix, where Charles Leclerc damaged his front wing after contact with his teammate Lewis Hamilton at the first corner, dramatically illustrates the internal tensions and lack of clarity in managing critical situations. In contrast, McLaren has capitalized on its strong technical momentum. Its new MCL39 is an aggressive evolution over its successful predecessor. Every component has been optimized, from the front wing to the rear suspension, achieving a much more efficient and adaptable aerodynamic package. Furthermore, its operational structure has matured significantly compared to 2024. In situations where Ferrari hesitates or improvises, McLaren executes with surgical precision, which has allowed them to establish themselves as the team to beat at this start to the season. The pressure on Ferrari doesn't come solely from McLaren. Red Bull, despite its internal turmoil and the catastrophic start of its second driver, has shown that, in the hands of Max Verstappen, its RB21 remains a fearsome weapon on high-speed circuits. Furthermore, Mercedes has taken an unexpected step forward, thanks to the leadership of George Russell and the promising adaptation of Kimi Antonelli. This means that Ferrari must not only resolve its internal problems, but also adapt to a championship where competition has reached a level of intensity not seen for more than a decade. Hamilton's challenge, then, is not simply adapting to a difficult car. It is finding his best version in an unstable environment, overcoming media pressure, and facing rivals who are unforgiving of even the slightest mistake. Ferrari, for its part, must evolve not only technically but also culturally. The Scuderia needs to eradicate its old operational flaws, build an agile decision-making structure, and learn to manage the pressure of a tight championship where every millisecond and every strategic maneuver can mean the difference between glory and failure. Ferrari has in its hands one of the most ambitious projects in its recent history, but also one of the most fragile. The key question remains: will they be able to turn their potential into tangible results before patience, both internally and externally, runs out? While Ferrari is waging its own internal war for stability and success, the rest of the paddock is going through a series of turbulences that have made the 2025 season one of the most unpredictable and exciting in recent memory. Red Bull, the team that until recently dominated Formula One with an iron fist, has suffered an operational collapse that has affected both its performance and its internal stability. The abrupt departure of key figures from its technical organization, coupled with the power struggles that intensified after the Horner scandal, have left the Milton Keynes team vulnerable in a way it hasn't been since its golden age. The case of Liam Lawson is the starkest example of this new reality. Having arrived at Red Bull as a promising youngster, he was quickly discarded after just 2 Grands Prix, becoming the scapegoat for the performance issues of a difficult-to-drive car. Lawson's replacement by Yuki Tsunoda, although officially presented as a technical measure, sent a devastating message to the entire grid. At Red Bull, patience has disappeared, and decisions are now made under immediate and ruthless pressure. For Max Verstappen, this volatile environment has set off alarm bells. The Dutch champion has hinted that he is not willing to waste years of his career waiting for the team to rebuild its lost hegemony. If Red Bull fails to regain its competitive edge quickly, it would not be surprising to see Verstappen consider options elsewhere, a scenario that would completely change the balance of power in Formula One. At the same time, McLaren and Mercedes have grown stronger in the chaos. McLaren, led by Lando Norris in a state of grace, has demonstrated it has the most solid technical and operational package on the grid. Its meticulous approach to the development of the MCL39 and its ability to maximize difficult weekends has allowed it to take the lead in the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes, meanwhile, has surprised with a partial rebirth thanks to the work of George Russell and the unexpected competitive maturity of Kimi Antonelli, who, despite his youth, has shown a poise and speed that bode well for a brilliant career. Amid this turmoil, Ferrari must not only find a way to improve its own performance. It must do so while withstanding the media pressure, both internal and external, that grows every week. The human drama is palpable in Maranello. Every strategic error, every mistake on the track, every bad pit stop, resonates with an intensity amplified by the colossal expectations that have always accompanied the prancing horse. And at the center of this storm is Lewis Hamilton, who, beyond his talent, now faces a daunting personal and emotional challenge, adapting not only to a new car and team, but also to a culture profoundly different from the one he experienced at McLaren and Mercedes. Hamilton has always been a driver of sensations, with complete confidence in his machinery. However, at Ferrari he has found himself in an ecosystem where emotions, internal politics, and the weight of history play as important a role as telemetry data. This new environment demands more than technique. It demands emotional resilience, internal leadership, and the ability to be a beacon of stability amidst uncertainty. It's not enough to be fast. At Ferrari, to succeed, you have to be able to carry on the tradition of an entire country that views Formula One as a matter of national identity. Thus, Hamilton's challenge is not just to beat McLaren, Red Bull, or Mercedes. It is, above all, about overcoming the ghosts that haunt Maranello, the fear of failure, the pressure of eternal expectation, and the open wound of almost 2 decades without a world championship. Every race weekend is a test not only of skill, but of character. And every victory, every podium, or every disappointment is not measured solely in points, but in their ability to endure, to unite the team around them, and to keep alive the flame of a dream that Ferrari and Hamilton share, to become world champions again. The true dimension of the challenge facing Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari cannot be understood only in terms of lap times or race finishes. The climax of this story is not built on simple results, but on the brutal tension between latent potential and the harsh reality of an adaptation that progresses at a slower pace than many expected. Talent is not enough. History is not enough. For this project to work, Ferrari and Hamilton must achieve a perfect symbiosis in record time in one of the most demanding and ruthless environments in modern Formula One. From a technical perspective, the SF25 is a machine with enormous capabilities, but its performance window is so narrow that any slight deviation in setup or track conditions can destabilize its aerodynamic balance. The car suffers particularly during periods of high lateral load, where changes in tire temperature and changes in the condition of the road surface disproportionately affect its performance. This means that even small adjustments can transform the car from a contender for victory into a vehicle barely fighting for points. Mastering this car requires not only technical precision but also an almost instantaneous instinct for adaptation, something that not even a 7-time world champion can impose through sheer willpower. For Hamilton, every practice session, every race stint, every technical meeting represents a battle against time and against himself. Accustomed to an environment like Mercedes's, where predictability and reliance on the equipment were almost absolute, he now faces the need to rebuild his connection with the car from the ground up. It's not simply about adapting your driving style to the SF25, but about reconfiguring your entire understanding of how to extract the most from a package that is still being defined. Ferrari, for its part, is experiencing its own internal drama. At the team level, there is constant pressure to justify a monumental investment in signing Hamilton, both in financial terms and in symbolic capital. The Briton's arrival not only brought sporting expectations, but also the promise of a cultural revolution that would raise the bar, precision, and consistency of the entire structure. However, transforming a culture entrenched for decades is not an immediate process. Ferrari must balance modernizing its operational approach with preserving its unique identity, an identity that has often been both its greatest strength and its greatest limitation. The challenge is further magnified by the overall context of the season. McLaren continues to refine its MCL39, proving itself to be the most consistent car in all conditions. Red Bull, despite its internal instability, continues to count on the genius of Max Verstappen to salvage crucial points. Mercedes, partially reborn, is closing dangerously in the championship. In this highly competitive environment, where the margins for error have been reduced to microscopic levels, every small technical glitch, every miscalculated strategic decision, can be the difference between staying in the fight or being relegated to a supporting role. The season is still young, but the margin for error narrows race after race. Every session, every qualifying session, every race stint becomes a silent verdict on the viability of the Ferrari-Lewis Hamilton partnership. There is a fine line between epic success and devastating failure, and in 2025, that line has become thinner than ever. The challenge is monumental because it is not just a matter of pure speed. It is a test of mental resilience, cultural adaptation, and internal reconstruction for both the driver and the team. Ferrari must grapple with its own past, that legacy of failed strategic decisions, unfulfilled promises, and unbearable pressures that have so often broken even the greatest talents. At the same time, Hamilton must confront his own pride, his internal expectations, and accept that this challenge is probably the most difficult of his entire career. Determination isn't enough. Talent isn't enough. A complete transformation is needed on both sides to ensure this story doesn't end as another great disappointment inscribed in the annals of Formula One. But greatness, both in sport and in life, rarely comes from easy paths. The greatest moments of glory are those born from pain, sacrifice, and overcoming self-imposed limits. The history of Formula One is full of epic tales where champions were forged precisely in their darkest moments. Hamilton, if he can adapt, lead, and propel Ferrari to its first title in over a decade, would not just add another chapter to his already legendary career. He would build a narrative that would immortalize him as one of the few capable of changing the destiny of one of the greatest institutions in motorsport. The question then is not whether Hamilton has the speed. That has never been in doubt. The real question is whether he has the will to embrace the chaos, to accept the pain of the process, to endure when the world around him demands immediate results. And whether Ferrari has the inner strength to sustain his commitment, to evolve in the right direction, even when the path to the top seems ever steeper. Every Grand Prix from now on will not simply be a battle for points. It will be an act of faith, A psychological war between the fear of failure and the hope of redemption. The entire paddock watches, the press speculates, the fans dream or fear. And you, who have followed this story so far, have before you the opportunity to witness one of the most intense and exciting narratives in contemporary Formula One. The 2025 season poses an open question that only time can answer. Will we witness the definitive rebirth of Ferrari under Hamilton, or will we witness how even the greatest can be defeated by challenges that seem insurmountable?